In lecture 7, let's talk about implementation of maritime security at international level and national level. Okay, more specifically here in the United States. So maritime security is a combination of international standards and national governments. To be more accurate, it should be national legislation, right, or national policies. So there is a logic here. You should know that international standards, they are usually working at international level and national level when transportation is happening. For example, ISPS code. We have talked about this code before. We will introduce it again in this lecture, but it is a result of international convention. But it is not only working when the transportation is happening on high seas, right? Within different countries, all those ports and vessels, most of them, they're still following ISPS codes, right? So international standards may work at national level. On the other hand, national policies and national legislations, they are exclusive for a specific country, right? When your transportation is happening outside of this country, they do not usually work, right? If you are on high sea, then international standards are working. If your ship is in another country, then in most scenarios, you have to follow the legislation and laws of that specific country, right? So that's the logic here. International standards, they are usually working at international level and also national level. On the other hand, national policies and legislations, they usually only work within specific countries. Of course, all those countries created those legislations and policies, right? And there are three parts for maritime security, right? Firstly, you need to protect ports and vessels, right? Ports, they are homes of vessels, and vessels, they are vehicles for cargoes, to move from one, to transport from one country or one place to another place, right? And then you need to protect international maritime supply chain, right? This chain includes land-based infrastructures, for example, ports, right? Factories, and also include the links, maritime transportation links between countries or within a country, right? Between different places of a country, and also intelligence and domain awareness activities. You have to make sure that there is government agencies collecting and exchanging intelligence within a country and at international level, and critical domains need to be protected, right? For example, the engine room of a ship, right? The fuel tanks area within a specific port, right? They're critical areas, and their security is important to the security of the transportation, maritime transportation, and they need to be created. They need to be protected, not created. Sorry. So here in U.S., legislation for maritime security, main legislation for maritime security includes the Maritime Transportation Security Act, signed into law in 2002. Usually we call it MTSA, right? The second one is called NSMS, a National Strategy for Maritime Security, based on HSPD 13. So Homeland Security Presidential Directive, because HSPD was issued in 2005 and NSMS was created in 2005. So this HSPD 13 was specifically issued by President George Bush Jr., right? So the objectives of NSMS, so prevent terrorist attacks, of course, right? Protect maritime related population centers, big cities with ports, right? And critical infrastructures. Minimize damage and expedite recovery after an attack, and safeguard the ocean and its resources. So they are not very specific. They are just principles and purposes, right? So general objectives. And strategies to achieve these objectives according to NSMS. So firstly, enhance international cooperation. For example, the exchange of intelligence, right? And then maximize domain awareness and embedded security into commercial practices. So this one and the next one, unify public and private security matters. They are actually together. It means that we should have unified policies for maritime transportation security. It means that no matter at national level or even lower level, the policy should be consistent. And also, no matter you are working for a public sector, for a public agency or sector, or for private sector, for example, you're working for a company, you should follow, there should be unified policies for security, for maritime transportation security, right? A very bad scenario is that there is no national level of policy making for transportation security, no matter maritime or land transportation or aviation. And different agencies, they have different sayings, and the government has their policies, and some companies, they have their own security measures. This inconsistency is very dangerous. Okay, and it usually leads to weakness in transportation systems. Okay, and lastly but not least, assure continuity of the marine transportation system in the aftermath of attacks, which means that the transportation system should be built with resilience, right? Even there was an attack, which is something we do not want to say, but it is possible to happen, right? Even there was an attack, there should be resilience, right? To make sure the recovery of the system, of course, the sooner the better, right? Okay, next, I want to talk about a critical maritime network nodes and vessels, because they're important, right? And the maritime transportations, they are not as euro as land transportation systems and aviation transportation systems, because the later two land transportation systems and aviation transportation systems, they are very Euro commonly. They're commonly used by ourselves in our daily life. But maritime transportation systems, they're not that Euro. So I just want to give you some examples and concepts. Okay. So firstly, cargo ship port. Cargo ship ports, they are for cargo transportation, of course, including bulk carriers, container ships, and normal cargo ships, right? And these vessels, they're responsible for moving cargoes from one place to another, right? National level or international level. And cargo shipping ports are their specific destinations. Okay, and here is a photo of Hong Kong port. Okay, Hong Kong port. So just big ships and cranes to load containers and unload containers and containers. Looks very colorful, right? So that's because the color of all those containers. Colors used for containers must be very obvious. So we can see a lot of yellow containers, red containers, and bright blue containers, right? So yeah, here is a table for top 20 world container ports in 2010. Now it's 10 years later, but I do not think the distribution here changed a lot. And you can say, who is who is the winner here? Obviously, we have a lot of Chinese ports, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 out of 20 uh, ports here are from China. So obviously, it's an indicator of China's economy, development, right? And then we have a lot of other ports from Asia, especially East and South Asia. For example, Singapore, South Korea, right? United Arab Emirates. It's a country in Mid East, but still a part of Asia, right? And then we have Taiwan region and also Malaysia, right? Malaysia, right? So you can say that when we're talking about maritime transportation system, Pacific Ocean, which is the largest ocean on this planet, is obviously the busiest region in terms of maritime transportation system, international maritime transportation system. So who is using Pacific Ocean for international business? Obviously, all those countries along the coast or coasts of Pacific Ocean. So a big country is United States. So actually, there are 3 ports from United States, right? LA, Long Beach, and New York. New York is on the East Coast, right? It's not for Pacific Ocean, it's for Atlantic Ocean. Long Beach, I'm not sure it's on the East Coast or West Coast. West Coast, I suppose. About this, I'm not sure. Los Angeles is obviously on the west coast of United States, right? So that's actually the east side of Pacific Ocean. Who is on the west side of Pacific Ocean? Obviously China, right? And then other East Asian countries, Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan, and Malaysia, South Asia, right? So it makes sense. So most of these ports, they are on the rim of Pacific Ocean. So what are those rest ports? They are from Europe, of course, Netherlands, Rotterdam, right? Belgium, Antwerp, Germany, Hamburg, right? Sounds food, but yeah, it's a city in Germany, right? So yeah, and the largest port around the world for containers is currently Shanghai, and then Singapore, then Hong Kong and Shenzhen, right? Okay, so next type of port is passenger cruise port. Since they are for cruise, of course, they are for entertainment, specifically for tourism, right? So we have passenger cruise ships parking in passenger cruise ports. So this is a photo of Miami port, and a very famous ones: Port of Miami, Port of Canaveral, still in US, right? Port of Shanghai, Port of, sorry, should be PORT instead of POT, okay? It's not for cooking, it's a port. I will change it. I will adjust it in the PDF, okay? Port of Singapore. So you can see these big cities, they're usually important tourist destinations, right? I'm not sure if you have ever on a cruise before. So usually you can play, you can relax on the cruise. And when the cruise is parking at a specific port, you can go to this, you can just get off the ship and have fun at the port, or within a specific city and get back to the cruise, and the cruise will just move to another destination. So you repeat this process, right? So these cities, they profit a lot from tourism, of course, okay? And the next type of port, or say maritime network node, is called ferry terminal. So I have two pictures here. They're both from New York City. New York City. So there is ferry between New York City and New Jersey, right? A lot of people, they're using these ferries to work, to travel from New Jersey to New York City, right? So yeah, ferry ships, they are some of them, they are for commuting, right? Some of them, they are for what? Again, tourism. There is ferry between it's called Battery Park Ferry Terminal, right? It's a ferry terminal in New York City along on Manhattan Island, and between Manhattan and Liberty Island, right? So obviously this ferry trip is for tourism, right? Okay, and then we have pleasure craft marinas. They are for private small ships. Again, this type of port is also for entertainment, right? Why would you buy a private small ship, right? For fun, right? You want to hang out with your family, with your friends on the water, right? So this is a picture of a pleasure craft marina. When I was living in Milwaukee, there was also this type of marina there, or port there, because a lot of people, they like to have fun on Lake Michigan, and in order to do that, they need a ship. They need a ship. But this one is, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the place in this picture, but it should be somewhere in tropical area, because we can see palm trees, right? It's definitely not from Milwaukee or Chicago or any city along the shore of Michigan, Lake Michigan, of course. Yeah, and there is another very special type of maritime network node. It's called canal locks. So you would say canal is a means for transportation, right? It's not a port, but you can consider canal as a port because it's very special. It is moving ships from low places to high places, because usually, naturally, when you are using a ship to move from one place to another, you are either moving from a high place to a low place, or two places with similar elevation, especially when the distance is very short. But a canal was made to make sure that a ship can move from a low place to a high place within very limited distance. How to do that? It means that you need to build a water elevator, just like an elevator. It moves you from low places to high places. But here, it's not a human. It's not something like a cargo. Yeah, it is cargo, but you actually have to move huge, big shapes from low places to high places within very limited distance. Okay, so you can consider canal as a link, but I would say you can also consider a canal, especially all those canal locks, as small nodes. Okay, so of course, these canal locks, they are for bulk carriers, container ships, or normal cargo ships. And here is a cross section of a canal lock. So a canal lock is formed by two gates. Okay, one of them is a lower gate, another of them is an upper gate. So how to just elevate a huge ship from low place to high place? So the idea here is Very simple, actually. Um, when you move, when you move the shape from a lower place into a lock, the lower gate will close, the upper gate will be open, and the water will be charged into this lock. Due to the force of floating, your shape will be elevated by water, right? And when the shape is elevated, you can move to what? To next lock. Of course, you have to open the upper gate, right? And also close the filling valve. So when you are using this method to move from one lock to another, the elevation of your shape is actually what? Increasing gradually from one lock to another. So if it is the other way, you are trying to move this shape from a higher place to a lower place, it's similar, right? The upper gate will open first, your shape will just move to this lock, right? And the upper gate will be closed. The filling valve will also be closed, but this time emptying valve will be open. So which means that the water in this lock will be discharged. Meanwhile, your shape, the elevation of your shape will decrease because the water is being discharged. When the elevation is correct, right, the lower gate will open. And you can just move your shape from this lock to the next lock, right? Meanwhile, the elevation of your, or you can say the, the, the position of your shape has been changed from a high position to a low position. So yeah, you can consider a canal as an elevator for shapes, and each lock can be considered as a node, or you can say this whole canal is a huge port who is able to elevate shapes, right? Or in general, move a shape from a low place to a high place, or from a high place to a low place. So that's canal or canal locks. Okay. So now let's talk about links. Right. So there are inland waterways along rivers, along or on a lake, right, and also there are offshore routes. Usually these routes, they are existing on oceans, right? Pacific Ocean, Indian Ocean, Atlantic Ocean. And here is a website to dynamically show those offshore routes. Okay, I'm gonna pause a little bit and try to share this website with you. Okay, here is the website of the dynamic map for offshore routes. Right. So here is some introduction. I'll just stop the introduction of this project here, and I will leave it to you because the link can be found in on that slide, so you can just come here anytime you want. And I would say this is a very good geo-visualization of international offshore maritime routes. Okay, so yeah, let's get back to the slide. Let's get back to the slide. Yeah, here. Okay, so let's talk about international and national instruments for port and vessel security. So the first one is an international one. We mentioned it before. It's 2002 amendments to the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea. It's called SOLAS, right? It's principal international instruments of port and vessel security. And the fruit of this convention of SOLAS is ISPS code, okay? International Ship and Port Security Code. So it establishes a framework for international cooperation between governments, agencies, and industries, establishes role and responsibilities for stakeholders in the international maritime transportation system, also ensures in-time and efficient collection and exchange of information, provides methodology for security assessments, and ensures the confidence that adequate and proportionate security measures are in place. So this ISPS code is a fruit of SOLAS, and all member countries should follow this code. And different countries, they are responsible for security plans and for the certification, for certificating their own ships and ports based on the code, right? So the responsibilities are assigned to different member countries to follow this code, right? So in US specifically, Coast Guard, this agency or this unit, this this government agency is responsible for monitoring and enforcing ISPS compliance. Okay, we have saw these two figures before. We saw these two figures before. The first one, security levels. They are security levels required by ISPS code, right? On the right side, they are general content should be included in ship security plans. Like I mentioned before, different countries, they are responsible for making their own security plans, but these plans should include the content listed here, at least. Okay, and of course, different countries, they are responsible for issuing international ship security certificate, which means that the ship should be examined from time to time, yearly with a specific time period, right? So after every 2 years or every 3 years or even every year, a ship should be examined by local government agency to make sure that this ship is following ISPS code. Okay, and also there must be a security alert system on ships according to ISPS code, right? I also showed you this figure before when we firstly discussed ISPS code. It's basically a satellite information system, alerting system, right? When you're attacked, you push the button and the signal will be sent to the satellite and transferred to a ground station, and the ground station will use the internet to inform the owner of the ship, the government of the ship, right? And maybe security providers, and they can send help to defend the ship, right? Right. Okay, I will just stop here because from next video, I'm going to introduce national level policies for port and vessel security. Okay. Okay, I will see you in the next video.